Section 1 of The Elements of Style by William Strunk, Jr. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. The Elements of Style by William Strunk, Jr. Section 1. 2. Elementary Rules of Usage. Rules 1 to 4. 1. Form the possessive singular of nouns with apostrophe s. Follow this rule, whatever the final consonant. Thus write: Charles's friend, Burns's poems, the witch's malice. This is the usage of the United States Government Printing Office and of the Oxford University Press. Exceptions are the possessives of ancient proper names in es and is. The possessive Jesus, Jesus', and such forms as for conscience sake, for space conscience space sake, for righteousness sake, for space righteousness space sake, but such forms as Achilles' heel, Moses' laws, Isis temple are commonly replaced by the heel of Achilles, the laws of Moses, the temple of Isis. The pronominal possessives hers, its, theirs, yours, and oneself have no apostrophe. 2. In a series of 3 or more terms with a single conjunction, use a comma after each term except the last. Thus write red, white, and blue. Honest, energetic, but headstrong. He opened the letter, read it, and made a note of its contents. This is also the usage of the Government Printing Office and of the Oxford University Press. In the names of business firms, the last comma is omitted, as Brown, Shipley and Company. The abbreviation etc., even if only a single term comes after it, is always preceded by a comma. 3. Enclose parenthetic expressions between commas. The best way to see a country, unless you are pressed for time, is to travel on foot. This rule is difficult to apply. It is frequently hard to decide whether a single word, such as however, or a brief phrase is or is not parenthetic. If the interruption to the flow of the sentence is but slight, the writer may safely omit the commas. But whether the interruption be slight or considerable, he must never omit one comma and leave the other. Such punctuation as Marjorie's husband, Colonel Nelson, paid us a visit yesterday, or my brother, you will be pleased to hear, is now in perfect health, is indefensible. Non-restrictive relative clauses are, in accordance with this rule, set off by commas. The audience, which had at first been indifferent, became more and more interested. Similar clauses introduced by where and when are similarly punctuated. In 1769, when Napoleon was born, Corsica had but recently been acquired by France. Nether Stowey, where Coleridge wrote the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, is a few miles from Bridgewater. In these sentences, the clauses introduced by which, when, and where are non-restrictive. They do not limit the application of the words on which they depend, but add, parenthetically, statements supplementing those in the principal clauses. Each sentence is a combination of two statements which might have been made independently. The audience was at first indifferent, Later it became more and more interested. Napoleon was born in 1769, At that time, Corsica had but recently been acquired by France. Coleridge wrote the Rime of the Ancient Mariner at Nether Stowey, Nether Stowey is only a few miles from Bridgewater. Restrictive relative clauses are not set off by commas. The candidate who best meets these requirements will obtain the place. In this sentence, the relative clause restricts the application of the word candidate to a single person. Unlike those above, the sentence cannot be split into two independent statements. The abbreviations etc. and jr. are always preceded by a comma, and except at the end of a sentence, followed by one. Similar in principle to the enclosing of parenthetic expressions between commas is the setting off by commas of phrases or dependent clauses preceding or following the main clause of a sentence. The sentences quoted in this section and under rules 4, 5, 6, 7, 16, and 18 should afford sufficient guidance. If a parenthetic expression is preceded by a conjunction, place the first comma before the conjunction, not after it. He saw us coming, and unaware that we had learned of his treachery, greeted us with a smile. 4. Place a comma before and or but introducing an independent clause. The early records of the city have disappeared, and the story of its first years can no longer be reconstructed. The situation is perilous, but there is still but one chance of escape. Sentences of this type, isolated from their context, may seem to be in need of rewriting. As they make complete sense when the comma is reached, the second clause has the appearance of an afterthought. Further, and is the least specific of connectives. Used between independent clauses, it indicates only that a relation exists between them without defining that relation. In the example above, the relation is that of cause and result. The two sentences might be rewritten. As the early records of the city have disappeared, the story of its first years can no longer be reconstructed. Although the situation is perilous, there is still one chance of escape. Or the subordinate clauses might be replaced by phrases. Owing to the disappearance of the early records of the city, the story of its first years can no longer be reconstructed. In this perilous situation, there is still one chance of escape. But a writer may err by making his sentences too uniformly compact and periodic, and an occasional loose sentence prevents the style from becoming too formal and gives the reader a certain relief. Consequently, loose sentences of the type first quoted are common in easy, unstudied writing. But a writer should be careful not to construct too many of his sentences after this pattern. See Rule 14. Two-part sentences, of which the second member is introduced by as in the sense of because, for, or nor, and while in the sense of and at the same time, likewise require a comma before the conjunction. If a dependent clause or an introductory phrase requiring to be set off by a comma precedes the second independent clause, no comma is needed after the conjunction. The situation is perilous, but if we are prepared to act promptly, there is still one chance of escape. For two-part sentences connected by an adverb, see the next section. End of section 1.